All right. Well, I know we are expecting some more people, but we've got a lot of content to cover, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining us for this second installation of our Reach Ready series. We do have another workshop next week that will talk a little bit about navigating regulatory pathways as you look to develop your biomedical product and how to position your project claims to make some of those regulatory hurdles a little easier. Um, just a reminder that we do have our pre-application open. I assume that's why you're here. And those applications are due at 5 p.m. on Friday, February 7th. That's 5 p.m. Mountain Time, and that will close right on the dot. So if you do experience any delays in getting your pre-application submitted, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to help if you need that. I am joined here today by William Donch from Focal Medical and Monica Serbin from Montana Biotechnology Center at the University of Montana. And my name is Lydie Wagner. I'm the operations manager for Rocky Mountain Reach. Um, yeah, I think we're just going to take it away and I'll hand it over to Bill and Monica. If you do have questions along the way, you're welcome to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. I'll be monitoring both of those. We will have time, hopefully, for some questions at the end. And if you would rather just ask those live, you can use the raise your hand function and I'll call on folks at that time. All right, well, I will stop talking now and turn it over to our presenters. Thank you.
All right, I am actually going to share the desktop of one of my windows, and because there's a few documents we're going to be jumping back and forth in between. When I am in full slideshow mode, I kind of lose visibility of like the chat and all that other stuff. So, Lighty, I'll be relying on you to say, hey, so we have a question. So let me go ahead and share my desktop. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the slideshow into slideshow mode. And hopefully everybody can see the full window.
Yep, you're
So
good.
excellent. All right. So why don't we introduce ourselves? So Monica, why don't you introduce yourself and I'll introduce myself so they know who's working with them.
Yeah, so I'm actually a full professor at the Montana University of Montana Department of Biomedical and Pharmaceutical Sciences. And I'm also the president and co-founder of a startup and university spin-off called Mana Discoveries. Bill and I worked together in industry before, so it's awesome to be involved in this activity together. And Bill, over to you.
Yeah. So yeah, Bill Donch. You can see from that list, I do a lot of different things. Right now, I'm the chief technology officer of a oncology drug delivery startup at Focal Medical. I'm also working with directly with Monica's company and a whole bunch of other things that I'm doing on the side. I've been in the med tech industry now going on almost 30 years. You can tell by the gray in the beard, and really happy to spend some time with you all talking about this topic today. All righty. So let's go through the agenda. This is what we're going to try to cover today. And we're going to keep an eye on the clock and make sure we have time for questions at the end. So one of the first things that we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about are value drivers, and specifically how value drivers apply to medical technology. What do we mean when we say value drivers? What are the key aspects? Some of the factors that influence it. We'll provide some examples and give you an opportunity to do a self-check and see if how whether you're working with the concepts. Then we're actually going to get into the concept of the target product profile. What is it? What are the benefits? When should I start one? When should I be doing one? What are some of the key elements that belong there? We'll look at some examples and then do another self-check. And then last but not least, if we have time, we're going to spend a little bit of time on a case study of a specific, this is a real commercial product called Everest Fibrin Sealant, and talk a little bit about that in terms of the good and the bad and the ugly, and how a well-developed target product profile might potentially have benefited that product. And then we're going to have some time at the end for Q&A, specifically around your specific interests and topics in this area. The more practical, the better. So if you've got some if you're working on something and you've got some questions or some specific things, hopefully we'll have some time to talk about it. So that is the agenda for today. So one of the first things we're going to do, we have this cool little tool called Mentimeter, and there's a couple of self-checks along the way. And what we thought we'd do is test this out. And the way this works is you grab your phone, you scan this QR code, and you enter some text. In this case, just a single word or a set of words. And just to test it out, we'd like everybody that's on the call to do this. So pull out your phone, if you can, scan that QR code, and that should pop up a web browser. And then when you uh, there, you'll be presented a web page on your phone where you can go ahead and just enter some words about how you're feeling about this as you enter this training. So while you're all doing that, I'm going to pop over to this window, and I'm going to put this in presentation mode. And so these are some of the words that are popping up. So I see some excited people, interested people. I like the word actionable. So we're getting some responses here. That's good. So I don't see scared or frightened or where's the door? That's awesome. Excellent. All right. Well, so it looks like the Mentimeter system is working. So let me go back to the presentation now. And let's talk a little bit about value drivers. What are they? What are the factors? So value drivers are factors that determine the perceived worth of a medical technology. So in the simplest terms, how is this thing going to positively impact the health of patients? How is it going to positively impact the healthcare system? How's it going to impact hospitals, clinicians, right? What are the positive attributes? And there's a whole bunch of things here, from clinical effectiveness through the ability to address unmet needs. So these value drivers are all positive pro statements, very simple statements that you can make about how you think your medical technology idea is going to be perceived. How do you think the worth is going to be perceived? Okay, these are and what's really important about these is they are really going to be the language that you use to define your target product profile. So key aspects of medical technology value drivers, and I'll go through these one by one, and I'll stop time to time, Monica, if you have any additional comments here. One of the first things you need to be thinking about, obviously, is clinical impact. If it's a biomedical technology, if it's a drug, if it's a device, if it's a combination product, what are you trying to do to improve a diagnosis, a treatment, or managing of an existing medical condition? And in terms of, can you improve efficacy? Can you improve accuracy? Can you reduce complications? That type of thing. You should be always thinking patient, 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 right? So, before we go on to clinicians and hospitals and everybody else who could benefit, what is the patient going to get out of this? You should be thinking cost. So many products, just they may be amazing solutions, but they're not cost effective at all. And in a healthcare system the costs are spiraling out of control right now, bringing in extremely expensive medical technology solutions that don't really do that much better or only a little bit better than what we already have at a higher cost, you're going to be always at a kind of an uphill battle. Your technological innovation, as a scientist or a researcher, this is often where a lot of folks spend a huge amount of time. They can talk on and on about the innovation of their product. Monica, do you want to speak to this a little bit?
So toggling here a few screens and the unmute button. Okay, so this should be simplified now. Bill, if you want, I can just address things at the end of the slide because I think
Okay.
there's some things that are common for academia and then some that are
Okay. Well, I'll move to direct. So as I was saying, as innovators, as technologists, as research scientists, as engineers, we love this box and we love to talk about this box a lot. And that's great. That's awesome. But it on its own, it is not enough to carry the day. Just because something has a huge amount of technological innovation, if it costs too much or has marginal clinical impact, or you can't really articulate how the patient's going to benefit from it, you're going to struggle. So be wary of the sort of egocentric technological innovation side. You do want to make sure you differentiate yourself, but there's a whole bunch of other things you need to be thinking about. Safety. You should always be thinking in terms of how am I improving patient safety, clinician safety. How do I take treatments that are kind of marginal at best in terms of patient safety, and how do I improve upon that? Always be thinking that. Where is the fit in the market? Do you have a very specific patient population in mind? Do you have a very specific healthcare setting in mind? The more specific you are here, the more that you can identify the value drivers associated with this, the better off that you're going to be. Very often, there's a lot of the technologists in us, it's like if we invent it, they will come, right? We have this great solution, and that's the classic, hammer looking for a nail, right? You should really be able to define who it is specifically is going to benefit the patient populations and how. And one that often gets overlooked is regulatory compliance. So this should just be a standard. How well is what you're doing adhering to the necessary regulatory standards in terms of safety effectiveness? If it's really, if this is something where regulators are going to scratch their head, they've never seen anything like this before, you're going to have to do a lot of work to explain how this fits into the existing system. So the sooner you're thinking about that and you're thinking about the value associated with that, the better off you're going to be. So I'll just pop this up real quick, Monica, but the goal here is to articulate competitive value in all of these categories, but understand that some of these may be more important than others, may exceed others. There's trade-offs between some of these things. But every one of these stones needs to be turned over, and you need to be able to speak to it intelligently. Monica.
So yeah, this slide is great. And if we look at the right side, the first two boxes, so clinical impact and technological innovation. So I think these are concepts and areas that are very familiar to the academic researcher, right? This is stuff that we constantly have to put in our grants. And so I think we're comfortable with this. What I see, and I'm speaking now from the perspective, I'm one of the reviewers. I've been reviewing for years for NIH, for STTR, SBIR grants. And so kind of shortcomings that we see there is that people are very excited about their science, but they're not thinking about how to actually productize their concept and technologies. And so if we look at patient experience, you kind of need to put yourself in the shoes of a patient. So you come up with this awesome situation, but it's going to be super painful for the patient to be treated with that. Will it make it to the market and will become a product? Probably not, right? So you need to take that into account. Also, you need to figure out who's your customer. And very quickly, I can share with you my very first industry experience was for a mid-sized startup company that licensed the tissue engineering technology from Dr. Atala from Wake Forest, right? Very cool. They were actually engineering hollow organs for implanting into the patients. So a scientific marvel, but when it came to make it into a product, the product was so complicated and there was so much variability from doctor to doctor in the deployment process and the outcome that the product failed and the company went under. So keep in mind that stuff that's exciting scientifically doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an awesome product, right? And then safety profile is kind of intuitive, market fit, and cost effectiveness. I would suggest to try to think early on what's the most cost effective way and the leanest way you can make your technology. So if you can make it from 3 ingredients rather than 10, that's best. Again, it goes back to the regulatory approval process. And then also it comes down to scalability and cost effectiveness. So add to the academic hat this kind of entrepreneurship hat as well, and try to figure out early on how can you be scalable, efficient, lean, and have a product that can actually beat the competitors. This is all I have to say.
Excellent. So there are external factors that you have to consider that should always be influencing your value drivers, and there's 4 key ones that we're going to go through, and these are really part of the lens that you should be filtering some of your thinking through. So, we all know demographics is a big deal. There's aging population. This continues to be the case, not just in the US, but around the world, leading to increased demand for medical technologies that are going to address chronic diseases that are just growing and growing and growing. There are diseases that we're treating now that, patients didn't even live long enough to enjoy. I'm joking. And so now that we are living into our 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond, we now diseases that might have killed you are now becoming chronic diseases, and so you have to focus on, and that's there's great opportunity there, right? There are great opportunities for medical technology solutions to treat those, to take deadly fatal diseases, turn them into chronic diseases, sort of like how we treat diabetes and things like that. Changes in healthcare policy. So this has been an ongoing thing for, probably the past 30 years, where reimbursement structures and incentives for value-based care, this has been an ongoing thing, and people want to see value for these technologies, right? A lot of businesses for years got away with, kind of making a slightly better version of things they already had, and then trying to charge a premium for it. And it's getting harder and harder to do that kind of thing. So you have to be thinking value out of the gate. How do I the rule kind of goes 2 ways. Either I can do something so amazingly great and different, tackling a disease state, that I can command a significantly higher price for it, or I have to show how I'm significantly taking cost out of the healthcare system. Those are the 2 buckets you have to play in, right? If you're playing anywhere in between there, you're gonna struggle. So it's very, very important to be thinking about reimbursement. Physician adoption. I personally, I have worked at companies like Johnson & Johnson. I've worked at companies like Allergan. And I've seen products get way, way, way down the line before there's any evaluation by the very physicians who are going to use them. And there's one. It's kind of a funny story now, but I remember there was a group of engineers that were working on 2 or 3 different products, and some of them were further along, some of them were earlier stage, and they got a group of physicians in a room to do evaluations of these products. And it was one of those sort of the behind the mirror sort of interviews, where the products were being presented to the clinicians, and the engineers were behind the glass sort of listening to the commentary. And I watched one physician pick up the product and literally just throw it in the trash and say, who told you to make this? What drove you to do this? Did you talk to anybody before you made this? And the sad reality was, no, it was a bunch of engineers who decided on their own that the world needed this new widget. And it was very clear, not only were physicians not going to adopt it, but they were kind of making them angry. They said, we need these things. We don't need this, right? And so, it's really, really important through the entire process when you're doing this work to talk to the people who are going to actually use the product and get their feedback. And, don't be afraid of negative feedback. I'll give you another example of one of those behind the glass interviews. I had a case where we had one product and we had a number of clinicians that were coming in one by one, and they were evaluating it, and they were each getting $1,000 honoraria for their time, for coming in. And it was very clear that there were certain clinicians who kind of came in and were picking up their check and leaving and saying, so when they would ask questions like, where in your practice do you think you would adopt this, or how do you think you would use this, or whatever, they gave very kind of generic, well, under these circumstances, and it depends on the price and whatever, and then they sort of took their check and left. And we had one gentleman who said, absolutely not. I would never use this product under its current form, and just verbally tore it apart. He didn't throw it in the trash can, but he didn't have much good to say. And the person doing the interviewing, she took a break and she came in and she spoke to us and she said, I really apologize. I apologize. This guy doesn't really seem like he's adding a lot of value. And I said, oh, no. You spend extra time with him. I want to understand why he has a problem with this. And we learned more from that guy in terms of what was the right thing that we should be working on. You just had to talk to him, right? Once he got his kind of initial observations out, the more we dug in, the more we learned where some of the issues were. And because of some of that negative feedback, we actually made a much better product because of it. So don't just go out and seek positive feedback, right, to stroke your own ego, right? You want to hear some of the negative feedback, but more importantly, why? Why are you not liking this? The other perspective that a lot of people miss out on is talking to the people who are actually going to reimburse, the payers, the insurance companies, right? I attended a payer seminar one time where all the big Humana and Aetna and all the big payers came to talk to technologists about what they were developing. And they said, we don't understand why you guys don't come talk to us earlier. Our doors are open. We'd love to have conversations with you to help you understand how we think about how we reimburse things, right? So you may have an amazing technology that you think is going to tackle a great unmet need, and the insurance companies don't see it your way. And so sometimes getting that early perspective, just like getting the early perspective of the clinicians and the physicians, is going to potentially help you modify and mold what you're trying to do. And that is probably one of the biggest misses that I think I see a lot of teams, the missed opportunity is not getting the payer perspective and learning the hard way as the product is much further down the line, that payers are having a real problem with it. So these are all kind of things that are going to influence value drivers. So just to kind of nail this home a little bit, I put up a couple of examples here, things that you may or may not be familiar with, but hopefully one of these things is familiar to you. One is an implantable cardiac defibrillator. These things there are millions of people walking around with these in them. The other is robotic surgical systems. So although this is not like an implantable device, this is actually helped to aid in minimally invasive surgery. There's a huge market for this kind of technology. And I want you to see the 3 example value drivers that are written down for each one. The first thing I want you to note is they're very simple statements. These are not long paragraphs, right? For the defibrillator, improve survival rates. I think we can all agree that a defibrillator that can recognize an arrhythmia and alter the heart function in a way that keeps that patient up and moving, and maybe doesn't allow, prevents them from going into cardiac arrest, is going to lend itself to improve survival rates. So it's a positive statement, and it's a short, simple concept. Reduces the need for reintervention, right? Before an implantable defibrillator, very often patients were having to get multiple surgeries or surgical interventions, and here you've got something that's real-time monitoring the heart rate and making subtle adjustments. And what does that lead to? Improved quality of life for the patients with these heart conditions, right? Very simple, positive statements. For the robotic surgical system, we've got the promise of minimally invasive procedures, enhancing the surgical precision, and therefore having patients with faster recovery times. So these are classic examples of very simple, positive value drivers. And I'm just, I'm sure you all can think of many more. And to see whether this value driver sort of idea is making sense, we've got another one of these Mentimeters. So here's where we're actually going to try this thing out and see how these concepts are landing. So I thought, what would be a product that a lot of people would have some familiarity with? And I grabbed onto the continuous glucose monitor. These are quite a hot topic now. It was only recently you can now get these products as an over-the-counter device. And so how does it work? There's a very small sensor that's inserted under the skin, typically on the arm, sometimes on the abdomen. That sensor is measuring glucose levels, transmitting that data to a receiver, which is often your smartphone or a dedicated device. And that receiver is displaying glucose levels and trends over time, and much more now. So we're there, you can see that these devices are starting to morph, and they're providing other biomarkers and things like that. And so for the longest time, these were available only by prescription only. Not all insurance is paid for them. We've now got, I think, 2 products that are now being, you can now get them as over-the-counter devices and get them reimbursed. And so hopefully you've got a sense of this product. And based on what we just talked about in terms of value drivers, if you can scan the QR code and just off the top of your head, enter some simple phrases that you think would define the value of a continuous glucose monitor. So, you want to be using, improved X, Y, and Z, increase this, reduce that, enhance this. So those are some words to help you along when you do this exercise. And I'm going to participate in this exercise as well because, it's fun. So. So I'm going to jump out of the slideshow, and I am going to bring up the results page, and let's see what is coming up. So let's see. That's this guy. Looks like we're starting to get some answers here. I'm going to put it in presentation mode. So improved continuous monitoring, reduced need for finger prick blood collection, faster glucose reading, reduced pain. Yep. User friendliness, better understanding. And oh, by the way, if there's been multiple answers that are kind of there's supposedly an AI tool that summarize these things. So if it looks like that's not what I wrote, it's probably because 2 or 3 people wrote the same thing, and then the AI tool reduced it down. I like this one, trendy, non-stigmatizing, right? faster data if something is wrong, increased data points for glucose levels, real-time monitoring of how I feel, right? I just ate a big meal and I can see what's going on internally, the convenience of it, right? So you can see you could brainstorm this for hours and just crank out, the top things that you think are important here. And so hopefully, and I think you guys have got it right. You understand the language, and it's important because this is the language of the target product profile. So let me jump forward here. Okay, so what is the target product profile? Well, hopefully, some of you done a little bit of research ahead of time, or maybe you're even working with something. But I want to spend a little bit of time on this, and Monica, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about this as well. This is a strategic document, right? This is a living document. This is something that really is built during the whole sort of life cycle of the product development, but it really is a strategic document. And you're defining the product that's under development. You're using value drivers to describe the desired characteristics and features. You're also using this document to map out the studies and the activities that you intend to complete to demonstrate all these valuable things, right? The performance, the efficacy. So all these things you're saying is better, improved, blah, blah, blah. You're going to have to provide data to support all those statements. And in fact, the next training is gonna talk about how you kind of carefully navigate your way through some of those statements and which ones you should probably use and maybe which ones you shouldn't. And you're going to use this to identify the features that you think are going to give you that competitive advantage. So, in short, a very well-designed TPP is really the roadmap that you, your team, and your entire company can constantly go back to and follow. That's going to define all the relevant elements, medical, technical, scientific, required to reach that desired commercial outcome. This is like the Bible of your business, right? So I can't stress how important it is to start writing this stuff down from the beginning, because when you feel like you're drifting off or you feel like you're sort of missing the target, you can go back to this document and go, what were we trying to do here? And maybe you learned something that says you need to update this and change this. But it's so important to get this down. Monica, any additional thoughts for
Yeah,
this?
what I would like to just emphasize here, I mean, this document and as we're going through the presentation and adding layers and layers of information, this might seem daunting, especially for someone from academia that's, kind of at the beginning of the road with moving out the technology from the lab. But what you need to understand that this is what companies are looking for. So if you down the line hoping that your technology is going to be licensed by a Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson, they would want to see a document like that. And as Bill said, this is your roadmap, and it protects you from scope creep. I know as scientists and researchers, we're driven by scientific curiosity, but now you're into the product development space, right? So you need to stay focused. You need to be lean and efficient with your experimentation, especially when money is short. You need to make very deliberate decisions as to what's your first priority and what you're spending your money on. And just understanding that at this point, when you're ready to move out your technology from the lab towards commercialization, you just need to start thinking about this. No one expects you to have a fully developed TPP, but that's what you should be striving for down the line. So that's it for me.
Yep. Now, the TPP is typically not a quality management or a quality systems document. It's a strategic document. The quality systems documents are going to be your user needs, your design requirements and traceability matrices, your risk assessments. Those are the documents that are going to go into your quality system. The target product profile is typically, because it has product characteristics, but it also has business information, all kinds of other stuff in there that is not typically a document that you would be putting into your quality management system. And it is not a replacement for the typical quality management system documents that I have listed here. So I'm going to pop these up quickly, and I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time because we've addressed some of these issues already. But the benefits of the TPP as the TPP, reducing development failures. If you map out early on what it is you're trying to do and how you're trying to measure it, you're going to reduce the probability that you're going to have late stage development failures. And we talked about some of those already. This is a great stakeholder communication tool. So you may have business stakeholders, that are not technologists, right? They can be management, board members, employees, advisors, investors, regulatory people, advisors. Having a central document that everybody can look at and know what the heck they're talking about is critical. So as a stakeholder communication tool, this is massive. This is what you're going to use to form the basis of your detailed project plan and your budget, right? So writing down what we want to do and what we want it to be. Well, guess what? If to support all of the evidence for those claims, you're going to need to run, 20 different animal studies. Well, you're going to have to time that out and budget that all out. And you may realize that maybe some of those features aren't as necessary as you thought. And it's an excellent business planning document. Now, just a real quick history. Where did this TPP come from? This was actually something that was adopted by the FDA, and it was specifically in the drug development space. So when you talk to people who are in drug development, they understand target product profiles. This is a concept they've been working with for years. It was only very recently, and when I say recently, in like the last 10 or 15 years, that people started to realize that this could be useful for both medical devices and in vitro diagnostics and combination products. And so now FDA sort of looks at this as an expected first step in developing your regulatory strategy. And if you look at the FDA guidance documents, and there is one on the target product profile, and I can provide a link to that in the chat later, it's still listed as a guidance document. A TPP is not necessarily required to be part of your regulatory submission, whether it's a 510K or an IDE or an IND. However, it is highly recommended, right? And that's FDA speak for, yeah, it'd be a real good idea if we saw it, because then we have a sense that you have some kind of game plan of what you're doing. And so, anything that's highly recommended is, like I said, that's FDA speak for, we kind of want to see it, but we're not going to force you to, right? If you have something else, great, but we really like to see things this way. So see that as another incentive for doing something like this. Okay, so Monica touched on this a little bit. When do I need one? When do I start working on this thing? Well, I thought I would throw into this presentation, and Monica, you haven't seen this slide, but I popped it in there at the last minute. This is a very classic stage gate medical technology development process that many companies have a version of this kind of process. And by the way, I'm not going to go through all of these columns. That's not the intent. Really what I want, and since you're going to get a copy of this presentation, this is a slide I would print out and like stick on your right next to your desk, because there's a ton of useful information here. But typical stage gate processes, right, where you've got the sort of fuzzy front end, the research end, and then you're sort of developing the concept, and then you get into feasibility, then you're doing formal product development, then you're validating the product, and then launching it. These are the typical stages, and then very often companies have gates where they stop and they assess to see, hey, is this a product we should keep moving down the line, or is it missing certain elements? And as you can see here, the preliminary target product profile is being generated in the early research stage. Now, this is an early document. This is like a back of a cocktail napkin kind of, I'm sort of joking, but you're just starting getting your ideas down about what this thing should be. But the whole point is your first draft is all the way back in the research stage, right? So anybody who's thinking, well, this is a checkbox I got to do once I've sort of developed my product. No, that's too late. You need to have a basic draft in the early research stage. Then as you do your experiments, you generate your data, you want to update it, highlighting the new key value drivers when you're doing some market research, right? You're going to want to update that. And then in feasibility, that's where you're going to want to finalize it so that when you go into formal product development, that's where basically that's the document everybody's. And so you can see, so when do I need to start doing it? As early as possible. And you're not expected to, as Monica said, to have a full all singing, all dancing document at that research stage, but you really have to start that thinking early. So I'm going to quickly pop this up because I'm looking at the time and I want to make sure we have time to answer questions. So these are the key elements that you're going to see in a target product profile. So right out of the gate, what's your value proposition? Can you write a very simple statement that explains what benefits you're bringing to the customers and how you're different from somebody else? What are the clear unmet medical needs you're trying to tackle? What are the specific indications and therapeutic goals and the medical conditions that you're going to try to go after? And you want to be as specific as you can. There is no, you're not here to cure cancer. What type of cancer are you trying to treat? What stage of cancer are you trying to treat? What patient population, what subpopulation are you trying to treat? What is the clinical outcome that you expect to see? Are you trying to take a patient that is metastatic and maybe make them surgically resectable, right? So what is it that you're trying to do with that patient population? Curing cancer is not a target product profile element you should be talking about. I should know what type of cancer. I should know, is this a solid organ cancer? Is this a blood cancer? I should know what stage of cancer these patients are in. Is there a specific patient population, certain age range, certain health conditions, that type of thing. What are your efficacy targets? Can you at this stage define the clinical endpoint? For example, I'm in the oncology space now, so it's a great example for me. There's a product that I'm working on where we're trying to convert locally advanced, non-resectable pancreatic patients to make them resectable. That's a very, very specific group of people, right? They are not metastatic patients, but they are basically the patients that the surgeons will do an exploratory surgery. They'll see that the cancer is advanced into involved structures. They'll get out and they'll go to the family and say, "I'm sorry, we can't do much more for this patient." We want to convert those patients into surgically resectable. And so you're using very specific clinical language to define your efficacy endpoints. What are the safety requirements? Can you define up front tolerability, what you think some of the adverse events are going to be, contraindications that you need to be concerned about? Can you clearly define the health outcomes, right? If your concept has any kind of dosing or administration requirements, can you be very, very specific? Is this thing going to be delivered in a pre-filled syringe? Is it, how is this thing going to be provided to the patient? Are there any specific formulation attributes or storage conditions? Does this thing have to be stored in liquid nitrogen? Does it have to be stored in a freezer, right? These types of things. And then can you get a sense of what your financials are going to be? What you believe your final cost of goods sold is going to be, which is the cost for you to manufacture this product, and can you estimate what peak sales are going to be? So these are key elements that you're going to find in a target product profile. Monica, any thoughts on this before we move forward?
No, again, it's a very comprehensive document and it's intimidating, especially when you talk to cost of goods. Maybe a lot of researchers from academia are like, I don't know even how to start thinking about that. So again, at this point, you don't need to have all the questions answered, but it's important to consider the scalability, how it would be sterilized, right? You can come up with the best solution ever. If there's no good way to sterilize it, that's a problem. And maybe you should address it early on rather than wait until you spend millions and millions and you realize that you cannot do anything else with it. So again, don't look at this document as something intimidating. Look at it as a roadmap, and try to figure out early on how can you position yourself to fill in these boxes in a way that strategic licensing partner can find appealing.
Exactly, exactly. And so just to tie this back to value drivers, it's the language it's going to help define these elements, right? So that's why we started out with value drivers, because you're going to really use that to help define these. So okay, this is great, all wonderful information, but how do we make one, right? So typically, if you're going to construct a target product profile, there's a couple of different models, right? So there's any number of designs, and I wouldn't get hung up on it. We're going to provide you a nice template that you can work with and alter it to your needs. I wouldn't get so much hung up on designs, but very often I've seen 2-level systems or 3-level systems. The 2-level systems will list all of the ideal characteristics of your product, and they'll often have, okay, here's the minimum acceptable value of it, and then here's the ideal thing. Here's the ultimate thing, and I'm going to show you an example of that on the next slide. And there's also 3-level systems where here's the target, there's an optimal and there's a target optimal and a minimum value. So it really depends on what you want to do, how granular you want to get. I think the 3-level systems are valuable if you've got to do some late program horse trading. Like we weren't able to hit all these targets, but we got to get, we might have to compromise on some things. But a 2-level system is much easier to work with. This is a classic example. You can find this one online. It's very, very simplified, but it gives you an idea of what we're talking about. This is an ischemic stroke revascularization product, and you can see here's a very simple description of the product indication and what the minimum result would be, and then what the ideal result, and I've highlighted in purple the differences between the sentences. And so just pulling out a couple of these things, look at the dosage form. The minimum accepted would be something that was a solution in a pre-filled syringe, but their optimal is to have the solution in an auto injector. And auto injectors are kind of all the rage now with the GLP-1 drugs and things like that. The primary product indication, they want this to be able to treat acute stroke patients immediately when the patient enters the hospital, but preferably the ideal result is that you could give this to an EMT to deliver it to a patient, and even before they arrive at the hospital, this product has been administered, right? So hopefully, and you'll get a copy of this, you can go through these and get a sense of, sometimes it's just a small turn of a phrase or a couple of extra words that can move you from what would be a minimally acceptable to an ideal result. So now we're going to do another quick self-check. And I'm going back to the continuous glucose monitor. But this time, now that we've talked about elements of the target product profile, what I'd like everybody to do is to scan the QR code and describe an ideal target for this product using the value driver language that you think defines the patient population, right? And so if I go back and just go back to the example, look at the dosage form, solution in pre-filled syringes, solution in auto injectors. Look at the primary product indication. Are there statements like this or simple sentences that you can put in that you think would be targets that this product should be able to hit? So I'll leave this code up and let people enter. I'm going to go ahead and participate as well, because why not? All right. So let me jump out of here and we'll go over to the results and we'll see what kind of information is coming in. So that would be this one. And I will go into presentation mode. So helps patient avoid glucose spikes, provides data to clinicians to treat patients. That's a huge one, right? So that real-time data. Adults with diabetes who need to monitor glucose levels multiple times a day, patients with an active lifestyle. So you can see there are targets that we're going to want this product to hit that are significantly, and you know what's interesting is these are coming in, they're all juxtaposed against the sort of common standard care, which is taking constant needle pricks, right? And that's good, right? And that's already showing, and these would land in, why is this thing going to be better than standard of care, which is needle pricks and standard glucose monitoring. So I think you guys get this. And then again, you can brainstorm these things and refine them. And look, when people work on these things initially, I see a lot of horse trading about which is ideal and which is minimum, and you move things around. And I've seen people do this where they put little stickies on the wall, and and they sort of build their TPP sort of real time on the whiteboard, and then eventually they reduce it all down. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. All right, so let me just take a minute or two to talk about this product, and then we're gonna have at least a minute or two to do some Q&A. So this is a product. It's called Everest Fibrant Sealant Patch. It's something that Johnson & Johnson Ethicon worked on for many, many years, and it was a product that emerged out of their biologics division and their what I'll call their sort of polymers, their sort of suture and mesh division, and they brought these technologies together to make the sort of super hemostat. So imagine a surgeon is doing surgery and they have a massive bleeder like you see in the movies where the blood's shooting up out of the patient and they're losing blood pressure quickly. Maybe they nick the aorta or something like that. And you need to staunch that bleeding immediately, like within fractions of a second, or the patient's going to bleed out and die. And so this product was designed to to serve that purpose, and it actually serves it very well. And I was at many test labs in which animals like pigs or sheep, they intentionally induced these traumatic bleeding events and were able to immediately shut it down and continue the surgery while this patch was applied. And so it was a technological marvel, absolutely fantastic, and just amazing to watch how it worked. I can tell you after launch, sales have been pretty lukewarm. And and you sort of scratch your head and think, well, something like this, you would think you'd want this in every single OR in the world, right? This is an amazing product. Well, the issue was marrying a very inexpensive polymer-based sort of backing with a very expensive biologic put this product in the price range of anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 an application. Okay. And so it turned out, and folks did, in fact, I've got the analysis here. This is analysis that was done in 2013, cost analysis of a fiber sealant patch for mild, moderate, and problematic soft tissue surgical bleeding. And the conclusions were extremely lukewarm. This analysis suggests that the hospital cost impact of Everest depends on the type of bleed. In problematic soft tissue bleeding, Everest may result in important cost savings for hospitals, in addition to meeting an important unmet need. Further study and additional populations may be required. Now, that may sound like a positive statement, but it's actually the kiss of death. And here's why it's the kiss of death. Basically, they niched the product. This became what was known as a break glass when needed product, right? So rather than having every OR with this product ready to deploy at the ready, the product was kept in storage, and if they had a traumatic bleed, they would send a surgical tech to go get it. And so It was not something that was widely deployed in hospitals because it was seen to be very expensive, and there were other things they could do to try to tackle that bleeding before they would drop anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 per application. It sounds penny wise and pound foolish, but the reality is that the product itself was made of materials that were so expensive that it priced itself essentially out of the market into a niche product. And it's a great case study of something that had that early target product profile work been done, right? This was really a technology driven project, not a user or clinician or patient driven product. And it is one of these things where the company had invested so much money in it, it just kept moving and moving and snowballing and growing. And like, we'll address those needs later. But it turned out to be actually kind of a commercial flop. So we got one last Mentimeter, and I know we're almost running out of time. But I would like to do this one, and I'd like to get a sense of how everybody's feeling now at the end of the session, and then we'll take a couple questions.
Hey, Bill, we did have a few people drop off.
Okay.
So I think we should just move and see if we've got
Okay.
any questions.
Okay.
So we'll open the floor. Tal, and maybe share with us how you feel about it now.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much. I learned a lot today. I'm a professor from University of Idaho. I attended the last year's first two workshops, but I have to drop the ball because I had a conflict on the schedule with another proposal. So I'll come back this year. Okay. I have two quick questions. Number one, I do have a clinician. He's more like a respiratory clinician, and I want him to work with me, but for this proposal specifically, what's his best role? Like a consultant, or be a senior personnel, or be, what's the best way to involve him? That's one question I have.
I think our eligibility requirements is that anyone who's not affiliated with a university or academic institution can be a co-PI on the project, but they just have to, so you would have to be the PI, and you could list them as a co-PI if you felt like that was the role that they were going to play. I do think that if we were to allocate any of the funding towards their salary or
The consulting
assistance,
fees.
then it would be under consulting fees.
Okay.
But it really just depends on how you see their role. We did get an application last year from someone who we did end up funding that had a co-PI on the grant that was from a company, and I think that we are paying them just via consultant.
Okay.
But if you think that they're going to play the role of a co-PI,
Yeah.
then you can certainly put them on as a co-PI.
Sounds good. I just posted a link in the chat because I'm serving on the ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers. So they have different subcommittees on so-called verification and validation. So this one is specifically on verification and validation for medical devices. I sat in their seminar as well. I'm glad that Bill mentioned the validation in the flowchart. I saw that earlier. I think this part, is one way, because this is instead of qualitatively, but this give you a quantitative step-by-step instructions how to apply VNV for medical devices. Do you think that should be included in the proposal, or is this for future after this proposal?
I don't know, Monica, what do you think about the doing validation work? Do you feel like that's within the scope of REACH?
I think it's too early for
Too
REACH,
early.
but again, you the way I would look at this is the same as, again, SBIR, STTR's proposals are evaluated by NIH. You kind of need to prove the feasibility of your technology, right? And so again, think about this in the way I often see proposals where it's like, oh, we have this system and we can recombinantly express 2 nanograms of this protein and it works like this and it's so exciting. But it's like, okay, realistically, if you express 2 nanograms and you need 2 milligrams for a
Mhm.
patient, is that feasible? The answer is most
Yeah.
likely not, right? So
Right.
think about aspects that prove the feasibility of your technology, not the technology scientifically, but for productization. Can you scale it? Can you sterilize it? Can you package it? Can you make it so that someone actually can take it and use it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the way to think about this, there's two V's. It's V and V, verification and validation. So you're
Yes.
in the verification step, and then the validation is all of your pivotal studies that that are your GLP animal studies and all of your pivotal packaging and shipping and sterilization studies. That's where the validation comes in because that requires validated methods, validated analyticals, blah blah blah. But verification, that's all your early pilot testing just to support that feasibility. And I think that makes more sense.
Yeah, it's interesting because in engineering, mechanical engineering, I'm also on the subcommittee for computational fluid dynamics and heat transfer. So our verification talk more about the numerical errors, in our simulation was controlled, minimized. Validation by compared with experimental data. So slightly different definition for medical devices, but the idea is the same. You need to make sure the user needs are met eventually. That's validation part for the medical device. So it's great. It's quite interesting. I can use some of my knowledge. One last question about the feasibility, because the device I'm inventing is a mucus clearance device. I'm sure it's going to work, but for the feasibility, I cannot test on the human lung directly. But I have a 3D printer sponsored by National Science Foundation. I can print the whole lung. I can put some mucus in it and then show the device is working. That's also sounds like a feasibility, right?
Oh yeah, that's
Okay.
completely legitimate. And
Yeah.
and also you need to play up the animal reduction angle of this. FDA has committed to animal reduction, and so
Yeah.
if you can show that that model is reasonable and legitimate and allows you to demonstrate feasibility, and then really reserve your lung actual testing in the lung and make that sort of a minimum, then you can really leverage that animal reduction angle that the FDA is always looking for.
That's a good point. Yep. Yep. Thank you so much for your time today. I learned a
Yeah.
lot.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, we're a few minutes over, so I think we'll just head it off there. But thank you so much. And let us know if you have any other questions. Happy to answer those via email as well if you need.
Great. Awesome. Appreciate it. Yeah. Have a great day.
Okay.
So
Hey,
much.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Monica. Thanks, Bill.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.